Luis Antonio Tagle flees country after Pope Francis' death. When news broke of Pope Francis's sudden death on April 21, 2025, the world stood still. The 266th pontiff, the first from the Americas and the Southern Hemisphere, passed away due to a combination of stroke and cardiac arrest following complications from double pneumonia and a lingering lung infection. He died not in grand papal chambers but in the modest quarters he'd chosen since becoming pope, a sign of the humility that defined his reign. For millions, his death marked not just the end of a papacy, but the loss of a spiritual leader who dared to challenge tradition, speak plainly, and call for compassion over condemnation. But while the bells of St. Peter's tolled for the world's most beloved pope in recent memory, behind the ancient stone walls of the Vatican, a very different storm was gathering, one of secrecy, power, and political calculation. The death of a pope, though deeply mourned, also triggers immediate logistical and spiritual machinery. A conclave of 135 cardinals was summoned to Rome, one of the most secretive and historically consequential rituals in the world. But this conclave would be unlike any other. Divisions in the Church had been widening for years. Pope Francis's reformist vision was not universally loved. There were factions, powerful, entrenched factions, that viewed his papacy as dangerously liberal, too lenient on doctrine, too open to modernity. And now, with the throne of St. Peter vacant, those factions saw an opening. Among the cardinals summoned was Luis Antonio Tagle, the charismatic Filipino cleric often dubbed the Asian Francis. For years, he had been quietly gathering influence, not through political maneuvering, but through his humble presence, his emotional sermons, and his passionate advocacy for the poor, migrants, and marginalized. In Tagle, many saw a continuation of Francis's vision, a man who could push forward the Church's modernization while maintaining its spiritual roots. With deep ties to Asia, where Catholicism is growing rapidly, and a demeanor that struck balance between tradition and progress, Tagle emerged as a top contender to become the next pope. But the Vatican is a place where assent rarely comes without a cost. As the conclave drew closer, whispers began to circulate. Rumors that Cardinal Tagle's reformist stance had earned him not just admiration, but enemies. There were murmurs of internal opposition. High-ranking conservatives allegedly viewed him as a threat to the status quo. The idea of a second consecutive progressive pope sent shivers through the old guard. Some insiders claimed that a smear campaign was ready to be unleashed should Tagle refuse to back down. Allegations of past mismanagement during his tenure at Caritas Internationalis, a humanitarian arm of the Church, resurfaced. Though never proven or criminal, they were enough to cast doubt. Whispers painted him as too soft, too emotional, too lenient, a spiritual shepherd unfit to steer an increasingly political Vatican. Then, just days before the conclave began, the unexpected happened. Cardinal Tagle vanished. No statement. No press release. No final address. Luis Antonio Tagle had fled Rome. The response from within the Church was immediate confusion. Some cardinals were said to be stunned. Others, particularly those aligned with conservative factions, appeared visibly relieved. Vatican officials refused to comment publicly, but off-the-record sources confirmed that Tagle's exit was as abrupt as it was unexplained. Theories began to flourish. Had he been pressured to leave by those fearing his election? Was he stepping aside for his own safety? Or had the conclave become so deeply corrupted by politics that a man of faith like Tagle could no longer, in good conscience, take part? Some viewed the act as noble, a refusal to play politics in what should have been a sacred process. Others saw cowardice, a retreat at a time when the Church needed moral fortitude. The media exploded. Headlines about Vatican conspiracies, secret deals, and the silencing of a reformist echoed globally. Devout Catholics who had admired Tagle's pastoral style and his connection to Pope Francis expressed sorrow and frustration. "He was our hope," one Filipino priest told reporters. "If he's gone, what hope is left for the Church?" The conclave continued without Tagle. And in his absence, the balance shifted. Conservative candidates gained traction. Without the most prominent progressive in the race, the scale tipped. Analysts reported that Pope Francis's legacy was suddenly in jeopardy. The reforms he had worked so hard to implement, on climate action, interfaith dialogue, pastoral care for divorced Catholics and LGBTQ+ individuals, and cleaning up Vatican finances, now faced potential reversal. For Tagle, his sudden disappearance marked more than a personal withdrawal, it became a powerful symbol. Was he, perhaps, The canary in the coal mine? A warning that even men of deep faith and popular support can be pushed aside by machinations too strong to fight? One Vatican commentator speculated, if Tagle had stayed, he would have been destroyed, not just politically, but spiritually. His exit was an act of self-preservation, of dignity. The last confirmed sighting of Tagle placed him en route to a monastery, far from the glare of Rome. Others claimed he returned to the Philippines in secret, perhaps to Raffle. Wait. But wherever he went, he left behind a conclave forever altered. His name, once uttered in hopeful reverence, was now spoken in cautious tones. Some wondered whether he would ever speak again, about why he left, about what really happened behind those closed Vatican doors. Critics accused Tagle of betrayal. They said he had abandoned his flock. That in leaving, he had allowed the conservative resurgence to gain ground. That he had left Pope Francis's legacy to die in silence. But his supporters fiercely defended him. This wasn't betrayal, one theologian argued. This was resistance. A refusal to participate in a system he knew had been co-opted. A rejection of a machine more concerned with power than prayer. And so, the Church moved on. A new pope was elected, one aligned more closely with traditionalist ideologies. The Vatican promised continuity, but few missed the shift in tone. The era of Pope Francis's bold compassion gave way to a colder, more calculated form of leadership. Official statements became more guarded. Outreach slowed. And quietly, policies that had been loosened under Francis began to retighten. Tagle's absence became its own kind of presence. His story turned into legend. A tale whispered in seminaries, debated by clergy, and pondered by believers. Was he the pope that never was? The man who might have saved the modern church had he only stayed? Or was he a reminder that no matter how faithful, no one is immune to the brutal politics that haunt even the holiest institutions? There are still those who hope for his return, not to power, but to the conversation. As a voice of conscience. As a critic of excess. As a spiritual guide untethered from titles. But for now, Luis Antonio Tagle remains silent. Watching, perhaps. Praying, certainly. And in that silence, there is a message louder than any speech. As one commentator put it, Tagle didn't just walk away from the Vatican. He walked away from a future written by others. In doing so, he reminded us that sometimes, the most powerful act is not seizing the throne, but refusing it.